I have always been fascinated by space, but I never imagined that the infinite silence could hide so much agony. Our mission to the space station seemed promising, with 4 highly qualified crew members. Yes, there should have been 5, but something went wrong right from the start. There was no explanation for the absence of the 5th member, and that was just the beginning of our problems. The arrival at the space station should have been a moment of celebration. After months of intense training and preparation, my colleagues and I were about to embark on the most exciting experience of our lives. The Starlink spacecraft glided through the emptiness of the cosmos, and everyone on board was filled with anticipation and a bit of nervousness. Everything started when we docked at the station. There was a feeling of unease in the air, something that we all noticed but no one wanted to mention. When the hatch opened and we entered, the first thing we noticed was the silence. Not the usual silence of space, but a heavy, almost palpable silence. It's hard to describe, but it felt like the very air was watching us. There should have been 5 of us. Me and 4 colleagues. However, when we did the first check, there were only 4 people present. Mark, our commander, was furious. He yelled over the radio, demanding an explanation from base on Earth, but all we received were evasive answers. The mission could not be postponed, and we were instructed to continue with only 4 crew members. It made no sense, but we followed orders despite the growing discomfort. I tried to convince myself that it was just an administrative error, a communication failure. But deep down, we all knew it was more than that. The shadows seemed darker, the noises from the life support system louder. Each of us started looking over our shoulder, as if expecting to see someone, or something, that shouldn't be there. Space, normally our ally, seemed to conspire against us. The absence of the 5th member wasn't just a technical detail, it was the beginning of a series of events that challenged our sanity. No one said it out loud, but we all felt an invisible presence, something that couldn't be explained by logic or science. This feeling began to erode the trust we had in each other, planting seeds of distrust and fear. I often found myself awake, looking through the station's small window into the endless void. I felt that the universe itself was conspiring to destroy us. Every shadow, every noise, seemed to whisper promises of disaster. The darkness of space was no longer a protective cloak, but a living entity, lurking and waiting for the right moment to strike. This was just the tip of the iceberg. The absence of the 5th crew member was the first sign that our mission was doomed to become a nightmare. And as the days passed, the true nature of the terror that awaited us began to reveal itself. From the beginning, the feeling that something was terribly wrong hung in the air. It didn't take long for technical problems to start arising, and the tension that already existed between us intensified. The space station, which should have been a place of exploration and discovery, turned into a place of uncertainties and growing fear. In the first week, small problems began to appear. Lights flickered for no apparent reason, communications were suddenly cut off, and there were failures in the life support systems. Each failure seemed to have a technical explanation, but the frequency with which they occurred and their perfect timing were disturbing. I remember one specific night. I was in the communication module, trying to re-establish contact with Earth. The static was so strong it seemed to fill the entire module, a cacophony that made me nervous. Suddenly, all the lights went out. The silence became absolute, and for a moment, I thought I heard a whisper. It was as if the station itself was trying to tell me something, but the sound was indistinct, mixed with the white noise of the static. When the lights finally came back on, I was sweating cold, my heart pounding in my chest. These technical problems created an atmosphere of distrust among us. We started to suspect each other. Each of us thought there might be a saboteur on board, someone playing with our sanity. Mark, our commander, did his best to stay calm, but I saw the worry in his eyes. He was the leader, but even leaders have their limits. Then I began to notice strange behavior in one of the crew members, Dr. Lucas. He was the onboard engineer, responsible for keeping everything running perfectly. But Lucas started to isolate himself. He spent long hours in the control module, supposedly checking the systems, but there was something wrong with his posture. He became increasingly paranoid, always looking over his shoulder, muttering to himself. One night, I decided to confront him. I found Lucas sitting in front of a control panel, his eyes fixed on a screen full of incomprehensible codes. When I placed my hand on his shoulder, he started violently, knocking a tool to the floor. "What are you doing, Lucas?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He just mumbled something about them watching us before returning to his insane work. Distrust began to erode the camaraderie we once shared. We started avoiding each other, each in their own world of fears and suspicions. Meals, which had previously been moments of relaxation, became uncomfortable silences. No one wanted to talk about what we all felt, that something was very wrong with the station. It was during one of these meals that the first outburst of anger occurred. Emily, our biologist, lost her patience with Lucas. "You're hiding something, Lucas. We know it. Why don't you just tell us?" Her voice echoed through the metallic corridors of the station. Lucas stood up abruptly, knocking over his tray of food. "You don't understand. You don't see. They are watching us." And with that, he left, leaving a trail of tension in the air. Each of us began to shut down even more, creating invisible barriers of distrust. We were adrift in a sea of fear and paranoia, and the space station, once a symbol of progress and adventure, had become our nightmare prison. The absence of the fifth crew member was already a sufficiently disturbing mystery, but the technical problems and Lucas's increasingly erratic behavior turned our mission into a true nightmare. And as the days passed, we began to realize that the true terror was just beginning to reveal itself. The truth that emerged from the shadows was brutal and devastating. Space, which already pressed us with its infinite silence and oppressive darkness, became even more terrifying as the true nature of one of our crew members was revealed. The space station, our temporary home and hope for new discoveries, turned into a psychological and physical battlefield. The last straw came on a quiet morning. I was in the control module, reviewing maintenance records when I noticed something strange. There were inconsistencies in Lucas's reports, behavior patterns that didn't make sense. I decided to confront Mark, our commander, about my findings. Mark, visibly tired and with deep dark circles under his eyes, analyzed the records in silence. After a few minutes, he looked at me with an expression that mixed fear and determination. "We have a serious problem," he finally said. "Lucas is hiding something, and we need to find out what it is." While we discussed the situation, we heard a metallic sound reverberate through the station. We ran to the engineering module and found Emily trying to extinguish a fire that was beginning to spread. We managed to control the flames, but not before noticing that the fire had been intentionally started. Essential parts of the life support system were damaged. "This was sabotage," Emily whispered, panic evident in her voice. The situation quickly worsened. Lucas began acting even more erratically, avoiding any eye contact and murmuring to himself about them watching us. It was then that we found what we feared most. In his dormitory, hidden behind removable panels, was an arsenal of improvised explosives and a diary detailing a malicious plan of total destruction. Each page was filled with paranoid delusions, revealing his intention to blow up the space station and kill everyone on board. Mark and I confronted Lucas. The tension was palpable, the air heavy with the imminence of violence. "Why, Lucas? Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to control my anger and fear. He looked at us with crazed eyes, a disturbing smile distorting his face. "You don't understand," he whispered. "They are coming. I need to stop them." The confrontation quickly became physical. Lucas, though thin and seemingly frail, fought with the strength of a desperate man. We managed to disarm him, but not before suffering some injuries. We tied Lucas up and locked him in one of the compartments, but we knew it wasn't a permanent solution. The station was full of his destruction devices, and time was against us. Discovering Lucas's plan turned our already tense mission into a nightmare. Each of us knew we were living on a countdown to destruction. Emily began having panic attacks, and Mark, our strong and determined commander, began showing signs of collapse. Fear spread like a virus, contaminating every thought, every movement. With Lucas neutralized, we focused on disarming the explosives scattered around the station. It was a race against time. Each wire cut, each device deactivated was a temporary victory, but the shadow of failure hung over us. Lucas laughed in his confinement, his eyes filled with incomprehensible madness. "You can't stop the inevitable," he repeated, like a mantra of death. The distrust between us intensified. Each suspicious movement, each misunderstood word, amplified the fear. We began to doubt our own sanity. We were isolated in the void of space, surrounded by invisible and visible dangers, fighting against an enemy who knew us too well. One night, while disarming another explosive device, I felt an overwhelming sense of despair. The station, once a place of hope and discovery, had become a labyrinth of terror. Lucas's words echoed in my mind. "You can't stop the inevitable." I wondered if he was right, if we were destined to fail and become just another story of tragedy in the history of space exploration. But even in the face of terror, there was a glimmer of determination. We couldn't give up. Not yet. Not while there was still hope, even if it was faint. We continued to fight, step by step, against Lucas's madness and the oppressive silence of space. And it was in this struggle that we discovered the true extent of human resilience, even when everything seemed lost. After neutralizing most of the explosive devices, we finally had a moment to breathe. Lucas's madness had almost destroyed us, but the worst seemed to be over. Or so we thought. With Lucas securely confined, the atmosphere seemed a bit lighter, but the scars of distrust and fear remained deeply etched in each of us. One night, when I was on watch, I received a distress call. It wasn't from Earth or any other station, but a weak signal coming from deep space. It was a voice, distorted and fragmented by static, but undeniably human. "Help us, lost, trapped." I recorded the message and played it over and over, trying to make sense of it. It seemed to come from a ship that should have been long abandoned. When I shared the message with Mark and Emily, the atmosphere became even more tense. Emily, always logical and scientific, argued that it was probably a malfunction or an old recording. Mark, however, saw it differently. "What if someone is really out there, needing our help?" he said, his voice filled with determination. Despite our doubts, Mark made the decision to investigate the signal. We prepared to leave the space station, boarding one of the small shuttles. The journey through the void was silent and oppressive, the tension almost palpable. As we approached the source of the signal, we saw the silhouette of a ship, half hidden in the shadows. It was a research vessel, supposedly decommissioned years ago. How it ended up there, sending distress signals, was a mystery we had to uncover. We docked with the derelict ship, our hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. The airlock opened with a metallic creak, and we stepped into the dark and abandoned corridors. It was as if time had stopped there. Old documents and personal belongings were scattered, a silent testimony to the lives that once inhabited the vessel. As we explored, the atmosphere became increasingly oppressive. It was more than just the lack of maintenance, there was a palpable feeling of something malevolent. The further we went, the stronger the sense of being watched. The whispers returned, this time clearer and more distinct. "They are here, they are waiting." In one of the control rooms, we found the ship's logs. They revealed a tragic story of a failed mission, of experiments that went terribly wrong. The crew had tried to contact Earth, but their signals had gone unanswered. Desperation turned into madness, and one by one, they disappeared. But the most disturbing discovery was in the medical bay. There, we found a single cryogenic pod, still active. Inside was the missing crew member from our mission. How he ended up there was a mystery we couldn't solve, but his presence answered the question that had haunted us since the beginning. He was the fifth member, sent ahead as part of a failed experiment to test the limits of human endurance in deep space. Reviving him was a difficult decision. We didn't know what kind of psychological state he would be in, but we couldn't leave him behind. When he finally woke up, his eyes were filled with fear and confusion. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. "They are still here, they never left." As we made our way back to our space station, the weight of our discovery settled over us. We had uncovered a secret that was never meant to be found, a tragedy hidden in the vastness of space. The whispers and shadows followed us, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of our understanding. The true horror was not just the madness of Lucas or the sabotage mission, but the realization that we were not alone in the void. Something ancient and malevolent watched us from the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. And as we returned to our station, the sense of unease grew stronger, the shadows darker, and the whispers louder. We had survived the nightmare, but we knew it was far from over. The terror that awaited us was just beginning, and the true nature of the void was about to reveal itself in ways we could never have imagined. With each passing day, the space station, once a beacon of human achievement, became a monument to our deepest fears. We were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape, adrift in the infinite silence of space, with the shadow of an ancient evil looming over us.